Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Pastor Kyle here at Gallup Hill Baptist Church. Welcome to Wednesday morning coffee. The topic today that I want to talk with you guys about is probably a familiar one. I want to talk about anger. So let me give you just a couple of scenarios this morning, okay? Imagine this. Imagine it's Tuesday morning, right? You're on your way to work. You're running a little late. You get behind somebody who's driving like 10 miles an hour slower than the speed limit. And there is no way to pass them. And so you are just stuck behind this person for miles. And as you're driving, right, your temperature is starting to boil to where when you finally get the chance to pass them, you speed by and turn and chew them out, or anger, right? Imagine it's Thursday morning, right? You just got out of a meeting with your boss, and now you have another project to do, right? One of your coworkers, for whatever reason, isn't pulling their weight. And so what was not your problem is now your problem. And so what's ahead of you for the next month is long weeks, Saturdays. And so as you're walking down the street, at lunchtime with a buddy to get a burrito for lunch, you're just snarling about this, okay? Imagine it's Friday night and you're getting ready to go to dinner, and you ask your spouse something and they just kind of respond half thinking. But for whatever reason, the response rubs you the wrong way and you shut down and you stop talking and you start giving them the cold shoulder. And the rest of the night's just awkward. Have you experienced those? They're all anger, right? Anger, guys, listen, anger has many faces. Sometimes it's hot, right? Anger can be hot, and that's the easiest to recognize, right? I mean, that's the temper and the rage and the fighting and the yelling and sometimes the violence, right? And you can see it in the face, and you can see it in the body language, and you can hear it in the voice. There's a hot type of anger. Sometimes anger can be very cold, right? It looks like withdrawal. It looks like silence. It looks like indifference or the cold shoulder. So if you think about hot anger as like a bonfire, right? It's big and bright, hot. Cold anger is kind of like the oven, right? You come lay your hand on it and it's probably cool to the touch, but you open it up and it's an inferno in there. So you can have hot anger, you can have cold anger, you can even have covert anger. And this is sarcasm, grumbling, complaining, right? Eye rolling. This is it's not as easy to recognize, but it's still a form of anger. And what I want you guys to understand today, anger is incredibly dangerous to you. Okay? Anger, it deceives and it destroys. When you're angry with someone, you are in effect judging them, okay? You have dragged them into the court of your mind and of your heart, and you have tried them, and you've convicted them, and you've sentenced them, and they are subject to the punishment that they deserve, which is your anger, your hot anger, your cold anger, your sarcasm, whatever it might be. But I want you to listen to what Jesus has to say about anger. And this comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. It's commonly known, part of the Sermon on the Mount. But Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder. And whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the fire of hell." Like, we think our anger is primarily dangerous to the other person, and sometimes it is. I don't want to minimize that, right? Words hurt, and some physical violence is a crime and can leave scars. But what Jesus is saying here is that the primary danger of anger is to you, the angry person. You see, we think it's justified, right? That they're guilty and they deserve the punishment. But Jesus says, no, you're the one, right? You're the one that's in danger of the council or judgment or, to the hell of fire, right? And why would he say something like that? Like, what's the big deal about anger? It actually helps if you go to a different part of the Bible. Jesus' half-brother, James, writes in chapter 4 of his letter that he wrote, he says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions." Did you hear what James said there? Like, why are we getting angry? We're getting angry because there's a denied desire there, right? That there's something that you want. You want to get to the ball game on time. You want a nice quiet evening at home. You want a break from work, and someone else is denying you that desire. That desire gets blocked. And so there's something inside of us, right, that we want so much that we're willing to yell or to ignore or to roll our eyes. And the Bible actually calls that an idol. And when we think of idols, if I say the word idol, you probably think of, a little statue that people worship, right? Maybe you think of the beginning of Indiana Jones, right? And that an idol is anything you love more than God or you love more than your neighbor. An idol is anything that takes love away from God and it takes love away from your neighbor. And Jesus says that's incredibly dangerous. Why? Because the two great commandments are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And anger, guys, is a very reliable indicator that you're not doing both of those. That there's something in your life that's more important to you than loving God or loving your neighbor being anybody around you, your spouse, your child, the guy across the street, the person you bump into at the grocery store, the guy sitting on the airplane next to you. That there's something in your life that's stealing that, right? So we think the problem is the other person, but Jesus is saying, no, the problem's you. The problem's in your heart. And he even goes so far as if you remember from the Matthew passage, to connect murder and anger. Why? I mean, if you think about it, murder, they're on the same family tree, right? Murder is just anger worked out in its ultimate, most destructive end. And anger is just murder in its infancy. So Jesus says if you've gotten angry, like if you read that Facebook and you're just boiling, right? Or your spouse and you're just, right, that you've already committed murder in your heart. You may not have done the violence with your hands, but you've done the violence in your heart. And that's wrong. So how do we deal with this? I want to give you just a couple of steps here as you think through this, okay? How do we heal from anger? The very first thing is you have to recognize that there actually is a problem there. And anger is one of these things that really pushes back and tries to deny, right? And tries to deflect. So if you're wondering, right, and you're coming up with all these rationalizations as to maybe why you're not angry, my encouragement to you would be to ask someone. Ask a spouse. Ask a child. Ask a friend. Am I an angry person, right? Do I have an anger problem? And be prepared for the answer. Recognize that you might respond angrily, right? Recognize they may be a little nervous to tell you because they're afraid of how you might respond. But listen, if you go on thinking that your anger is just your justified response to stupid people, then you're just going to keep burning down your relationships and burning down your own soul. Okay, so you've got to recognize there's a problem. Then the second thing, you've got to identify the desire. What desire is it in your heart that's getting blocked? What is it that you want so much that when somebody does something to deny it, you're willing to go nuclear on them? Or you get irritated, or you give them the cold shoulder, or you roll your eyes. What's that desire? Sometimes they're easy to find, guys. Sometimes they're really hard. Idols are notoriously difficult to track down, and they disguise themselves easily. So step one, recognize the problem. Step two, identify the desire. Step three, you have to be forgiven. Right? You have to come to God and confess it because you're robbing him of something that you owe him. You're putting something higher than him. right? God is ready and he's waiting to forgive. There's a God who loves you and wants to see you healed of anger, and Christ died to heal you of anger and to forgive your anger, but you've got to come to God because you're loving something more than you're supposed to with him with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? You've got to come to him for forgiveness. And then the other side of it is you've got to go to the other person and ask forgiveness. Jesus continued in that passage on Matthew, picking up in verse 23. He says, so if you're offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come offer your gift. Jesus says, if you know that you've offended someone, if you know that you've gotten angry at someone and you've damaged your relationship, then even if you're sitting in church, drop what you're doing and go and be reconciled to that person. Go and ask forgiveness. Go and tell them that you're sorry. Go to your brother or your sister and confess the wrong and ask them to forgive you. Listen, guys, anger it's an incredibly deceptive and destructive emotion. I actually talked about this a good bit more. This is an abridged version of a full-blown message on that than from a sermon series from about a year ago called Deeper. If you'd like to listen to that or you want to dive a little deeper into this, you can go to our website, gallophill.org, go to the sermon archive. It's in a sermon series called Deeper. Just scroll through that. You'll find the one. It's titled Anger. But listen, I pray the Lord helps you deal with anger. And we are an angry society, right? And there's so many things out there that just whether it's social media or news, that just they stoke the fires in us. And I think it's just destroying us. So I will pray for you that the Lord will help you deal with the anger. God bless you. Long to see you guys, and we'll see you on Sunday.